Good morning and welcome to Coffee with Alain. As you can see, we have a special guest today, Donna Miles. I told you she was coming on when I talked about her book, Hard Target Living. Supercharge your situational awareness, vanquish your vulnerabilities, and stay safe. And that's exactly the stuff we're going to be talking about today. And I'm drinking out of my wisdom mug because Donna's going to share some great wisdom with us today. And as always, remember, the podcast is brought to you by enjoylifesafely.com. So visit enjoylifesafely.com, get on the newsletter. You can do that by the newsletter box or download one of the free guides. But check out enjoylifesafely.com because that's what brings you this podcast every day. Now, let's learn a little bit about Donna. Donna, would you please just introduce yourself briefly to the audience, and then we'll dive into some good stuff from your book.
Sounds good. Thank you for having me, Alan. It's a pleasure to be here. So I'm Donna Miles. I call myself an educator and an author. I teach awareness-based safety. So my little tagline is, I don't teach people how to fight. I teach people how to avoid the fight. And I didn't happen into this domain in a typical manner that was chosen. I had a very extreme violent encounter that catapulted me into various avenues of defensive tactics training and executive protection training. And I recognized the need for this information to be spread to the general population. And that's where I find myself now, almost 2 decades later.
Wow, and that's awesome. And Jay and Vicky are here and said good morning. So good morning, Jay. Good morning, Vicky. Appreciate you guys being here and saying hello. And I briefly mentioned that when I talked about your book. And again, people, you need to get this book if you want some great information on safety. But the very beginning of this book, you shared a story that happened to you and your husband, a home invasion. And it was a terrifying experience. Could you share a little bit of that with the audience that you're comfortable talking about and sharing?
Absolutely. That is the incident that catapulted me into this domain. And he's now my ex-husband, still a good friend, but we were sound asleep one summer morning, and I woke up because I heard two of my dogs, both a Great Dane German Shepherd mix and a Great Dane Great Pyrenees mix, big dogs. I heard them panting and walking past the bed, and I was thinking, well, where are they going? And when I turned to look, I could see the doorway filled with the silhouette of this man, and I could see the silhouette of a baseball bat, and he was shining a flashlight in, and I froze. I sat up in bed. I said, Roger, someone's in here. He came in and basically started attacking us while we were still in bed with the baseball bat. We scrambled off the bed, and as I was standing at the foot of my bed trying to process everything and thinking, well, how's this going to play out? How much worse is this going to get? Roger kind of settled down into a lunge, and then when the home invader threw his backpack full of binding materials. So I should add, so this guy came in, he had a gun, a knife, and a baseball bat, and then he had a backpack full of duct tape, zip ties, nylon rope, and a roll of toilet paper. So he was definitely there to do business. He was wearing camo gear. He had a ski mask on, and he was wearing fingerless gloves. He was definitely prepared for whatever he might encounter, while we were not. We were completely unclothed, unprepared, had no weapons of any sort in our home. And so Roger had settled down into a squat, and when the home invader threw the backpack down at him and said, open that, Roger lunged and tackled the home invader. And I said to myself, okay, well, this is how it's going to go down. We're going to fight. So I got in there and did whatever I could to contribute to subduing the guy. There was a struggle for the baseball bat. I ended up getting it, and while Roger was basically wrestling the guy's arm so he couldn't hit us anymore, I started swinging the bat. with the sole purpose of knocking him unconscious and just stopping the threat. So, yeah, that was.
Yeah. And I mean, what a terrifying experience. I mean, to wake up in that. And fortunately, you guys fought back, which is the best thing to do. You don't want to just comply and let him tie you up, because then you're helpless and he's doing whatever ill intent he planned. So thankful that you guys did immediately, fight back. And fortunately, you were victorious, which not everyone in these situations are.
Right. And this is one of the topics that I talk to students about. I say, look, if there's one bad guy and there's two or more of you, that's a force multiplier for you. So even though this guy had several lethal tools at his disposal, with the two of us together, we were able to overpower him. And so it may in the moment seem like you don't have a chance, but you have to do what you can. You have to. You cannot be passive if somebody is threatening your life or even just threatening to harm you.
Yeah. Jay mentioned Crime Scene 2, which, well, this would have been Crime Scene 1 if he planned to do his things there. But, I always teach, if someone tries to abduct somebody on the street or from someplace, you immediately fight, because if you go with them to Crime Scene 2, that's when they get tied up and they find the different, victims. So, but
Absolutely.
Now, rather than teach people how to use that baseball bat, which you did very successfully, thankfully, you teach people how to keep that guy from coming in your house in the first place, and
Right.
things you can do to prevent that by making yourself a harder target, which at the time you realized you did some things that made you an easier target or a softer target.
Right. I should add that this approach was not my initial approach. My initial approach was to become lethal, to immerse myself in high levels of defensive and tactical firearms training. And my thought was, the next time this happens, I'm going to be faster, because it took a long time to subdue him. And I don't think I included this in the book, but we had an $80,000 homeowner's insurance claim for repairs to our bedroom, because everything, all of the carpet had to be pulled out. There was blood splatter on all of the walls, all of the furniture. It's violence is messy. And so I thought, well, I'm going to be lethal. Roger built a indoor gun range in our barn, and we literally practiced for hours and hours every day. We didn't miss a day, like you with your podcast. We didn't miss a day. And at first I felt really powerful, like, yeah, you just try. But I realized, yeah, I'm living my life with the mindset and the belief that I have no way to prevent and avoid a violent encounter. And that in and of itself, that mindset was disempowering. So that's when I started doing the executive protection training, which is more preventative measures, right? The executive protection specialists, they don't focus on fighting off bad guys, because they can't protect their VIP if they're fighting off bad guys. And when I started taking some of that training, I realized, wow, this is information that should be provided to the general population starting in childhood. Situational awareness, managing risk. We do it with other aspects of our lives all the time, every time. Crossing the street, we manage our risk. But when it comes to threats of human nature, we think we don't have any options other than to fight back or count on police. And so, yes, now I focus on the reason this home invader was able to get right up next to our bed while we slept is because we had 8 unlocked doors for him to choose from to walk right in. We lived in the middle of a 10-acre parcel of land. You couldn't see any houses from our home. I had no window coverings on any of our windows because who wants to block the beautiful view, and nobody can see us. And this man met someone who we had allowed into our home, a young man who we had mentored for a little while before we realized, yeah, he's probably not going on the straight and narrow. When he was introduced to us, we were told that he was getting his life on track after a long criminal history. And so, we wanted to be the good people and give him the benefit of the doubt. And so he shared information about our personal habits, and he and the home invader who eventually came in spent 9 months planning to invade us. And we had no clue. We literally opened the door for this person to walk in.
Yeah, and and you shared some of that in the book, and there you put a picture of the bedroom or part of the bedroom in the book, and yeah, that's what some people don't realize, that when you have blood and stuff all over the place, you got to bring in the hazmat people, and I also like that you said about the executive protection, because some people think, oh, a bodyguard, executive protector, you're just a Rambo type, Jason Statham, kick ass everywhere. It's like, no, if you're doing your job correctly, it's all the pre-planning and the threat assessment and the awareness, and to keep your client from ever experiencing anything.
Exactly. Because I can tell you firsthand, if you have a violent encounter where you have to use violence yourself, even if you prevail, it forever alters who you are. I am not the same person. I used to be far more social. I used to like to invite people over for dinner all the time. And now, 18 years later, I'm very, very selective in who I will invite into my home. And I don't see that ever changing. Now, I'm happy and I don't dwell on it, but it definitely has altered who I am and how I approach life as a result, even though we did prevail.
It does. I mean, I liked Andy Brown's book. Andy Brown was the Air Force police officer who killed the active shooter in the early 90s at the Fairchild Air Force Base in Spokane, that active killer at that hospital. When he wrote the book, he wrote about all the warning signs that were missed that could have prevented that. But he also wrote about what killing that individual did to him. And I like that he did that, because just so many people think, oh, an active shooter comes, I got a gun, that's the answer. And they don't really think about how prevention is so much better, and what it can do to a person, as you just said, when you're engaged in such a violent encounter. So I really like that Andy wrote about that, from that firsthand experience of, he did his job. He was the first officer on scene. He stopped the threat. He stopped the killing, but it did something to him too.
Oh yeah. I can't tell you, Ellen, how many people have said to me, oh, if that had happened to me, I'd have killed the guy. Well, you don't know that. You don't know if you would have even fought back. Nobody who hasn't been in a violent encounter really knows how they're going to respond in that moment. I don't believe we were created to be violent. I think that people get this image, this Hollywood movie image in their mind that violence is antiseptic. I mean, the scent of blood, it's strong. I think I mentioned that in the book. I could smell this guy's sweat and the stale cigarette smoke. And then it was just the scent of blood, just this metallic scent. And it's not something that the average person has a tolerance or a stomach for. And I don't wish that on anyone.
That's so true. I mean, Charles Bronson's Death Wish movies, especially as it went on the series, he's just killing people left and right. But in the original movie and in the book by Brian Garfield, when he killed the first person, he went off and threw up, and so I mean, it just sort of wrecked him a little bit. I mean, that's more realistic after violence, is going and puking, and having, all the shivers and the adrenaline dump and all that, that's more realistic than, shooting everybody and going through like Chuck Norris or Rambo or any of that.
Exactly. And it's what adrenaline does, and the long-term impact. I for a solid year would just randomly be flooded with adrenaline. Like nothing, no specific trigger, just all of a sudden just this whoosh, and then I'd just be like shaking. And for years, so this happened in Washington State, and this is another topic. People talk about places like New York being really dangerous, right? It's not the location, it's the situation. So we were in a small town north of Seattle, a rural country town at the end of a 3-mile long private road. So you don't know where it might happen. And
Yeah.
it happened in the summer. So as years passed, I started noticing, and it didn't occur to me to tie it into the home invasion, that there were times of the year I would become a lot more sensitive, a lot more hyperreactive, nervous. And after a few years, it dawned on me, it was the lengthening of the days. As the days started and the daylight hours started getting longer, it triggered those neural pathways that were developed that should have never been created in my brain.
Wow.
And so I would find myself at that time, in the summer months, just being really on edge. And it's changed a little bit since we've moved to Florida because we don't have those long daylight hours, but it was a noticeable influence. And as I said, it did take me a while to tie that in and go, oh, that's what it is.
Wow. Let's look at a couple comments and then let's share some ways people can stay safe. So Dixon said, so sorry to hear you were targeted by that scumbag, but so glad you turned it into such a beneficial mission to help prepare others should it ever happen to them.
Thank you.
And Dixon also said, in the past, I was asked to help an author of a book on executive protection, and people would be surprised how much covering the logistics of your environment and movement makes up the bulk of what's involved with such security.
Yep.
Exactly. Yep. Well, Donna, let's talk now. We'll switch from the ugly stuff, which, like Dixon said, so glad that you got through it and now have used it now to inspire and help people stay safe. What are some ways and what are some of the most important, I mean, it's all important, but what we say is one of the most important things somebody can do to stay safe that you teach people and write and talk about?
One of the most critical distinctions I try to hammer home to people is understanding the difference between a threat and risk, because there are threats in the world. We know this. But just because the threat of home invasion, the threat of rape, the threat of mass shooting exists, doesn't mean a person is automatically at risk for harm from those threats. And when we focus all of our energy and our attention on the threat, we forget to focus on ourselves and the opportunities that we can give or take away for those who have those violent intentions to get access to us. So when you stop looking just at the threats, if all I thought about before I was going to take a road trip was that the fact that there are drunk drivers on the road, I'd never drive anywhere. I don't think about that. I think about what I need to do to manage my risk, which is being aware of my surroundings, not texting and driving. So the same thing for people, understanding that if you are not paying attention to your surroundings, somebody can get closer to you and your ability to manage your risk is then compromised. So when people start thinking in terms of what is my risk, rather than, oh, there are bad people in the world and I'm going to worry about the bad people, they can take steps, they can take those same steps that executive protection specialists take on behalf of their VIPs. And I think I'm a VIP to me. My, as far as I'm concerned, I'm the most important person, and my family is the most important person. So I wanted to have that same benefit of those skills and that knowledge. So that's the first thing that I want people to understand. And I hope that gives people a little peace of mind. Just because threats exist doesn't mean you're automatically at risk.
No, and that's awesome. And that's, like I always tell people, I want you to know where the exits and stuff are. So if you're in a building and we have the threat of a fire, buildings catch on fire, people die in fires.
Yep.
But if you know 3 exits rather than just the one you came in, that threat is less because you have greater opportunities to mitigate the situation if a fire were to happen. I always use the nightclub out east where over 100 people died, most of them bottlenecked at the front hall. A handful went out the kitchen door. More could have went out the kitchen door if they would have thought about it or known about it. So just knowing those options, now the risk, the threat is always there. There always could be a fire, but we've lessened it. If we don't put candles under our dry Christmas tree, we've lessened the threat of a fire in the house, right?
Right. And so what you were just describing in terms of mitigating risk from a fire was increasing distance, right? So I try to teach principles so that instead of giving people a checklist of this, do this, do this, do this, they can apply those principles no matter what the potential threat is. So time, distance, and shielding. How much time you have to notice a potential threat before it's an active threat, and how much time you make it take that threat to get close enough to you. Distance obviously always gives you more time, and shielding whatever you can keep in between yourself, whether to provide a visual buffer or a physical buffer from the main impact, that those are what you can control. So in the book, I explain how those principles apply no matter if the threat is a hurricane or a virus or a violent person. In Florida, we're heading into hurricane season, but we don't worry about controlling the hurricanes. We know we can't. We know that we'll get advanced hurricane warnings. So that extra time. If we're in the path of where the hurricane is going to land, we're told to evacuate. That gives us distance. We can't pack up our houses, so we board up the walls or the windows and the doors. That's shielding. And then if you consider the global response to the pandemic, right? We need to slow the spread, time. We need to maintain social distance. We need to cover our noses and mouths, shielding. And whether someone believes that that was a credible threat or not, the principles guiding those suggestions were based on the principle of risk management, time, distance, and shielding. And it's, the same with driving. So it's the same when it comes to threats of human nature. Make sure you're paying attention. It seems so easy to say to people, put your cell phone away, go, pay attention. But also telling them, well, what is it you're paying attention to? You're just paying attention to what stands out as not typical for that environment that you're in. Like if you're at the grocery store, you're there to go grocery shopping, and everybody else who's there should be conducting themselves in the same manner with the same attitude as you are, because that is what that environment was designed to support. So you don't have to look at everybody paranoid and say, oh, is somebody going to just erupt? No, you just look for what stands out as not typical behavior. Someone wearing a long black trench coat on the beach. You don't need to even name it as dangerous. You just need to name it as not expected. And what is your plan? Increase time, distance, and use shielding. It's always the same, no matter what.
Yeah. We want to know the baseline behaviors and what is normal. That's your baseline. What's normal for the situation you're in. And if something deviates from that, then we pay a little closer attention of why.
Exactly.
And one of the chapters you have that I wanted you to talk a little bit about today, because I thought that was so great, is the hidden consequences of habits, mindsets, and beliefs. I mean, because most burglars go in to unlock doors.
Yep.
And a lot of places spend money on security, technology, but then they don't use it. Or, they prop a door open that's supposed to be locked for convenience, because safety and security aren't always the most convenient.
Nope.
And so you sort of address that when you're talking about habits, mindset, and beliefs, and then the consequences. So could you share a little bit about that?
Right. Well, so the reason we left all of our doors unlocked was because we believed we lived in a safe neighborhood, right? I've had people tell me, "Oh, I don't need your training. We live in a very safe neighborhood." Well, okay, that's fine. So if you believe something to be true and you get into the habit of living in a way that leaves doors unlocked, because our mindset was, well, it's kind of inconvenient for us when we're working out on our property to have to unlock a door if it's locked all the time. So we're just going to leave them unlocked all the time. And I think that particularly with women, we have certain beliefs that put us at more risk than is necessary. The belief that we have to be polite, that we have to accept attention or provide assistance to anybody who asks, and not keeping track of, well, how this person is closing the distance as they're asking me for assistance. So that goes back to me hammering in the difference between risk and threat. So we can't control the threats or the methods they use, but if we can reduce or eliminate some of our bad habits, like, going out and getting really drunk with people you don't know, that's a really very obvious for more mature people. But for younger people, explaining to them, if you can't control your body because you have consumed alcohol or drugs, then you're going to increase your risk. You can't protect yourself. So when they can focus on simple things and think in terms of, well, how will this influence the amount of time I have to notice a potential threat? How will this influence how close somebody can get to me? Then they can start to eliminate that. There are some things that I, especially with younger people, give them the checklist, which is never let your gas tank go below a half a tank. Because when you do, if you have to get gas unexpectedly because your gas tank is all of a sudden going ding, 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 you're on empty, what does that do to time, distance, and shielding? The amount of time it takes for you to fill your gas tank when it's empty is a lot longer than it takes if your gas tank is only half empty. You have control over where you're going to choose to get your gas, so you can go to a familiar place. If you have to fill your gas tank, you're out of your car, which provides some shielding for you, and somebody can come up to you, because gas stations are kind of transitional areas where people come and go. So you don't know how long somebody has maybe been lingering, just waiting for that perfect target to come and, take too long filling up while they're scrolling on their phone. So those are the easiest things that people can take control of, is just paying attention to the habits, beliefs, and mindsets that you have that might make it possible for somebody with ill intent to get close enough to you to harm you.
Oh, that's great advice. And, I teach the same thing, because you rather go to a gas station on your terms, daylight, safe time. I'd rather go to the Costco gas station where there's always a live attendant monitoring everything. It's open in the daylight. a very safe place to get gas, rather than, oh, we get it, we're late at night, it's after the movie, and it's like, oh my gosh, I won't have enough gas to get to work tomorrow. I got to stop at this convenience store gas station in where, the folks are doing drug deals around the corner.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
Another bad habit I see a lot of people, no matter what their age is, conveying information about themselves on their vehicles that people can see from a distance. You're entitled to your opinions about anything in the world, but if you convey that information to the whole world, you don't know who you might offend, whether it's their right to be offended or not. But why give that information to somebody that you believe a particular way, or you have a particular political affiliation? Keep that to yourself. The general public doesn't need to know. You don't know who's out there in that. Or if it's something like a particular dog you have, that can give somebody who's really slick the opportunity, if you are in a parking lot, for instance, to say, oh, you have a golden doodle, I have a golden doodle too. And it gives this feeling of familiarity, and, oh, they must be good people and they're just using that because they know that about you, and they can cause you to pause, which gives them more time, gives you less time. So again, we're back to that time, distance, and shielding principle. So,
and it's so hard because the person might be generally a good person that does also have that type of same dog. But we know, if you study, that criminals use those kind of ploys to get close to people, and they make themselves look vulnerable or have that commonality to get inside so you don't suspect them. I mean,
Ted Bundy used a fake cast and carried around an empty gas can, pretending that he was in a vulnerable position. And sadly, his ploy worked for him on multiple occasions. And so I don't live my life being rude to people, but I keep in mind that if I'm in a parking lot, I'm not in that parking lot for a social event. I am transitioning either from or to my vehicle for a certain task. And I can smile and say, oh, not today, or whatever, as I keep moving if somebody talks to me. But I'm not going to stop in a parking lot and have a conversation with somebody I don't know. I'm just not. Now, if somebody has a really cute dog, see, that's my weakness, is cute dogs. So my husband goes crazy. He's like, leave the dogs alone. But I'm just, keeping in mind the context and where you are, and what safety measures are possible for you when you're out there in a transitional area is important.
Yeah, I mean, the first time my wife and I were at New York City was when my daughter was a freshman in high school, and the band was playing at Carnegie Hall. And my wife and I went there to watch the band, and we were taking the ferry across to Staten Island so I could get the good view of the Statue of Liberty. And the guy coming up wanting to give me a CD. And I was pretty curt with him. I don't want your CD, and kept some distance between us. And when he moved on, my wife was like, you were sort of rude. I said, yeah, but I don't want him close to us. Later that night, we found out that one of the students that was in the band had $100 stolen from him by a CD person on the street. He and a friend were out, and they accepted the CD. And then the guy said, well, I want some money. And when the kid opened his got his wallet out to get he took $100 from that kid.
Yeah.
And then my wife was like, oh, now I really understand why you treated him that way. I said, yeah.
Assuming that somebody is nice and honest because you are nice and honest is one of those habits, beliefs, and mindsets that that can get us into trouble because we want to believe everybody is nice. I tell people your ultimate obligation is to your personal safety and to your family. In some of the workshops I do with smaller groups of women, I have them start out by writing down the names of 2 or 3 people who would be negatively impacted if they were harmed or killed. Because a lot of times we don't take steps for our own sake. But when you bring into play, look, do you know your wife, your daughter, their lives will be destroyed if you are killed or even harmed. Like they will be very impacted. So if you don't care to take these steps for your own self, do it for them. And remember, your goal is not to be everybody's best friend or win a congeniality award everywhere you go. It's to live your life and to take care of yourself and your family so that nobody else has to.
Kellen said good morning, so I say hello to Kellen.
Good morning.
And then, we've gone a little over a half hour, almost 40 minutes. One thing I like to ask folks, so this will be the last question. What is something you enjoy doing, and what do you do to incorporate into that to make sure you can enjoy it safely?
One of the things I most enjoy is spending time at the beach with my husband. And, you think of the beach as a very safe place. People wear minimal clothing, so it's pretty hard to conceal any weapons or anything like that. But we're always, my husband's a retired Seattle police officer, 35 years, and he's a defensive tactics instructor. So we're both, we work well together. I know if he sees something, I don't question it. Because as a 35-year police officer, his situational awareness is like heads and tails above me. He'll see something and say, "Did you see that?" No. And then I'm like, "Donna, where was your situational awareness?" But so just counting on each other and trusting each other and not questioning, not saying, "Oh, it's nothing." So we work together, and that's one of the things that I most enjoy. And then walking my dog through the neighborhood. We take different routes daily, but I am aware that I would pay attention to anybody who stood out as, never seen that person before. And why are they just standing on that corner? What are they doing? Maybe I'll turn here instead of walking past them. So it's always just a matter of making sure I have enough space and distance and time to get to where I need to go.
That is awesome. Where should people go to get this book?
They can go to Amazon.com and order that. In addition to that book, I have a series of children's books. There are 4 books in the series, and some of the same principles that I teach in the Hard Target Living book, I incorporate into the Valencia Rose series. My goal being to get children as young as 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade paying attention to body language, dominant versus submissive, and being aware of the exits and knowing all of the things that will keep them safe so they can be independent. I say, we teach children the basics of nutrition. They might not always choose healthy food, but they could tell you the difference between a healthy and an unhealthy food. And we do that to empower them to be independent in their ability to manage their health, and for us too. So it can be broken down into very simple principles of awareness and safety and risk management. And that way kids can start to be an active part of their own safety instead of just relying on being told what to do by adults. So awesome. I highly recommend that for people who have kids.
Yep. Get this. And if you find this book on Amazon, Donna's name will be there. Click on that and you'll get her other books as well. So they'll all be there on Amazon. And then besides writing the books, you speak and stuff. So, and if I'm correct, they can get a hold of you at the Hard Target Living, correct?
hardtargetliving.com. Yep. Send a contact to me and let me know if if you've got a group, you want to get a webinar put together. It is a passion for me. I feel that this is, again, information that everybody should have. It should be provided beginning in childhood. It hasn't been, but I see, with people like you and the others in our author group focusing on, hey, fighting back is the last thing you want. You want to be good at being able to do that if that happens, but prevention. So the message is getting out there. So teaching webinars and workshops, and that's one of my favorite things to do.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being on the show. And everybody,
Thank you for having me.
hardtargetliving.com. Get a hold of Donna. Definitely go to Amazon, check out her book. If you have kids, check out the kids' books. And as always, you can go to enjoylifesafely.com to check out some of the things that I offer everybody. So last time, just thank you very much for joining us, Donna. It's been a pleasure and some great information that you shared.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me, Alan.
Everybody, go out, make it a fantastic Friday, and I'll be back to see you tomorrow.